I never thought those words would come from her lips. Not from my daughter, the child I raised, the girl I clothed and fed, the woman whose first steps and first tears I carried in my arms. But that day, with eyes as cold as glass and a voice sharp enough to cut me in two, she looked at me and said, "You're too poor to belong." Have you ever felt your heart shatter in front of everyone? Have you ever stood frozen, unable to breathe, while the one you love most strips you of dignity? With just a sentence? That's what it felt like. It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. In her world, my sacrifices were invisible, my love wasn't enough, my worth was measured by money, and money was the one thing I no longer had. And before I go on, before I take you through the storm that followed, I want you to stay with me. Because this isn't just about me, it's about every woman who has been dismissed, underestimated, humiliated for what she lacked instead of celebrated for what she gave. If you've ever been made to feel small, unwanted, or unworthy, this story is yours too. And if you want to hear how I turned her words into a truth she couldn't ignore, stay until the end. Don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this, our stories, deserve to be told. Now, let me take you back to that moment. We were at a family gathering. Laughter, glasses clinking, smiles painted across faces that had no idea of the storm brewing inside mine. I had come dressed as best I could, an old dress, neat but worn, shoes polished until they could shine no brighter. I stood quietly, watching her in her element, surrounded by friends and in-laws, confident and radiant. I felt proud, even then. Proud to see how far she had come, how much she had achieved, but pride quickly turned to ashes. It started with whispers, little things I overheard, her friends joking about wealth, about vacations, about things that felt like a different world to me. I smiled politely, though my stomach twisted. And then she said it, out loud, for everyone to hear, her laughter mingling with their own. "My mother doesn't really fit in here. She's too poor to belong." The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. Too poor to belong. As if belonging had a price tag, as if love had to be bought, as if the blood in my veins and the years of sacrifice meant nothing because I didn't shine like the rest of them. I wanted to speak. I wanted to shout, to remind her of nights I went hungry so she could eat, of mornings I walked to work in torn shoes so she could go to school in new ones, of the countless times I chose her dreams over mine. But no words came. My throat locked, my chest ached, and all I could do was stand there, silent, while laughter echoed around me. That night, when I went home, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table, the same table where I had once helped her with homework, where I had once celebrated her birthdays with cakes I could barely afford. I stared at the wood, traced the scratches with my fingers, and felt every ounce of worth drain from me. But then, somewhere between the tears and the silence, a thought grew. Small at first, like a whisper. Then louder, stronger, undeniable. If she measured worth in wealth, then I would show her a different kind of power, not through shouting, not through anger, not through tears, but through something undeniable. Something she could never laugh away. And that was when I decided, the next day, I would sign the papers that would change everything. I sat alone that night, the echoes of her laughter still stabbing at my chest. Do you know what it feels like to be invisible in front of the very child you gave everything to? To stand in a room full of people and feel like a ghost, present, but stripped of value, stripped of dignity, reduced to nothing but the number in your bank account? That's what I carried home with me. The house was quiet, too quiet. I placed my purse on the chair, my shoes by the door, and sank into the kitchen chair as if gravity itself had grown heavier. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat in the dimness, in the hollow of silence, and let the words replay. She's too poor to belong. Poor. The word burned. How many times had I fought against it? How many years had I clawed my way through hunger, through exhaustion, through endless nights of work just to make sure she never felt that word tied to her? I remembered her little hands tugging at my sleeve when she was a girl, asking, "Mommy, can I have this?" And most of the time, I found a way. I remembered sewing late into the night to afford her school shoes, stitching until my fingers bled. I remembered skipping meals so she wouldn't go to bed hungry, smiling through the pain of my empty stomach so she would never know, and she didn't know. That was the point. I carried the burden so she could walk free of it. I endured humiliation so she could rise. Every scar on my hands, every ache in my back, every tear I cried in secret, it was all so she could shine. And now, with one sentence, she erased it all. Do you know what that does to a mother? It isn't just pain. It's a tearing of the soul. A wound deeper than betrayal. Because betrayal can come from others, but when it comes from your own blood, it breaks something sacred inside you. I buried my face in my hands and cried. Cried like I hadn't cried in years. The sobs shook my body, my breath coming in shallow gasps. For hours, I poured out the grief I had held in for too long, but grief has a way of turning into something else when it runs dry. When the tears finally stopped, a strange stillness filled me. My eyes were swollen, my cheeks damp, but my chest was steady. I thought of the years I had bent my back for her. I thought of the way she had thrown my sacrifices aside like scraps. And I realized something important: she didn't see me. Not really. She didn't see my strength, my sacrifices, my worth. She only saw what I lacked, and that, I decided, was her blindness. Not mine. I rose from the table slowly, almost mechanically, as if a new current had taken over my body. I lit a single lamp, opened a drawer, and pulled out the documents I had tucked away weeks ago. Papers that held power, not power of wealth alone, but of truth. My hands hovered over them, trembling not from fear, but from anticipation. I had been silent too long. I had endured too much, and tomorrow, with a single signature, I would show her that worth cannot be measured in riches. That belonging cannot be bought. That love and sacrifice carry a weight no one can dismiss. Tomorrow, she would see. Tomorrow, she would not laugh. The morning light crept through the curtains, soft and golden, but I didn't feel its warmth. I sat at the edge of my bed, my hands resting on my lap, staring at the floor as if the wood itself could answer the storm inside me. Sleep had not come, not truly. I drifted in and out of shallow dreams, haunted by her words, her laughter, the look in her eyes when she dismissed me. Too poor to belong. The sentence clung to me like smoke, impossible to wash away, but as the sun rose, something else rose within me too. A quiet strength, fragile but real. For the first time in years, I wasn't moving for her. I wasn't rising to meet her needs, or to keep her safe, or to silence her tears. This morning, I was rising for myself. I walked to the mirror, bracing myself for the reflection. My face was tired, lines etched deeper by years of sacrifice, but my eyes were different. They no longer looked empty. There was fire in them, faint but alive, like embers glowing in the dark. I whispered to my reflection, almost daring myself, "Today, you change everything." The house was silent as I moved about, fixing coffee, laying out a simple breakfast. I barely touched. My stomach was knotted, not from fear, but from anticipation. Every sound, the clink of the spoon, the hum of the kettle, felt sharper, heavier, as though the universe itself was holding its breath with me. On the table, beneath the lamp, the papers still waited. Their edges crisp, their words powerful, their meaning undeniable. I had tucked them away weeks ago, unsure if I would ever use them, unsure if I had the courage. But her words last night had ripped away all doubt. I ran my fingers over them, the paper cool beneath my skin. These weren't just documents. They were proof. Proof of years she had ignored, proof of strength she had belittled, proof that I was not the invisible shadow she thought I was. Do you know what it feels like to hold power in your hands after being powerless for so long? It's terrifying. It's exhilarating. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the fall might finally teach you to fly. I thought back to the day I first received them. I had walked into that office with trembling hands, unsure if I belonged there. The man behind the desk smiled gently as he slid the papers across, saying, "This will give you security. Don't underestimate what you've built." At the time, I had tucked them away, too afraid to use them, too accustomed to shrinking myself, but last night had changed everything. Last night, my daughter made it clear, she saw me as nothing. And that was exactly why, today, I would show her I was not nothing. I folded the papers neatly, slid them into my bag, and straightened my shoulders. The weight felt heavy, but not unbearable. No, it felt right. I stepped outside, the morning air cool against my skin, the world moving as if nothing had changed. Neighbors greeted each other, cars passed, children laughed on their way to school. But inside me, a revolution had begun. Every step toward the office where I would sign those papers felt like a drumbeat, steady and unstoppable. With each one, I thought of her words. With each one, I thought of the look on her face when she realized what I had done. She believed I was too poor to belong, but what she didn't know was that the very next day, I would hold in my hand something she couldn't laugh away, something she couldn't ignore. The building wasn't grand, not like the ones my daughter frequented, not like the places where wealth paraded itself in polished marble and glittering chandeliers. It was simple, quiet, unassuming. But as I stepped inside, the air felt different, thicker, charged, as if it knew the weight of what I carried in my bag. The receptionist greeted me kindly, her smile soft, her voice gentle. I nodded, unable to find words, my heart hammering in my chest. She pointed me toward the office at the end of the hall, and with each step, I felt both heavier and lighter all at once. The office smelled faintly of old paper and coffee, familiar and grounding. The man behind the desk looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You're back," he said warmly, as though he had been waiting for me all along. I placed the folder on his desk with trembling hands. "It's time," I whispered. He opened it carefully, flipping through the pages as though they were something sacred. "These are in order," he assured me. "All that's left is your signature." My signature. Do you know what it feels Like when a lifetime of sacrifice boils down to one moment, one stroke of a pen. My hand shook as he slid the papers toward me, the pen resting at the top like a blade waiting to be drawn. I hesitated, my mind flashing through memories, her first birthday, the way she clung to my legs on her first day of school, the way she once called me her hero. Then, just as quickly, her voice echoed again, too poor to belong. I straightened in my chair. My hand steadied. And with deliberate, careful strokes, I signed. Once, twice, 3 times, until the ink sealed my decision into permanence. The man smiled, gathering the documents, stamping them, making them official. Congratulations, he said softly. This changes everything. Everything. I sat back, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It felt as though a weight had lifted from me, a burden I had carried so long that I didn't know what it was like to stand without it. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was claiming something that was mine. When I stepped outside, the world looked unchanged. Cars still passed, people still hurried to work, the sky was still the same muted blue. But inside me, nothing was the same. The woman who had walked into that building broken, humiliated, erased, was not the same woman who walked out. I clutched the folder to my chest, feeling the edges press against me, a reminder of the power I now held. Power not in money alone, but in proof. Proof of my resilience, proof of my worth, proof that the story my daughter told about me was not the truth. She thought I was too poor to belong, but soon, very soon, she would see these papers. And when she did, she would have no choice but to face the truth she had ignored for far too long, the truth that her mother was never as powerless as she believed. I didn't rush to her. No, I let the hours pass, let the weight of those signed papers settle into my bones. For the first time in years, I felt like I was holding something sharp enough to cut through her arrogance. It wasn't revenge alone, it was justice. A mother's quiet justice. The next gathering came sooner than I thought. Another family dinner, another performance of wealth and status, another stage where she could shine while I tried to disappear into the shadows. Only this time, I wasn't the same woman. I arrived in silence, carrying the folder close to me. She barely looked up when I walked in, too busy entertaining her friends with stories I knew were half true. But when her eyes finally met mine, I saw it, the flicker of disdain, the judgment lingering there. She leaned in, her words a dagger masked in a smile. Mom, please, don't embarrass me tonight. Just stay quiet, okay? I wanted to laugh at the irony. Me, the embarrassment? The woman who had built her foundation stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice? My silence had been her shield for years, but now, that silence was ending. The night unfolded with chatter and clinking glasses. I sat patiently, sipping water, my hands resting calmly on the folder in my lap. Every so often, I caught her looking at me, that same air of superiority, tightening her features. Too poor to belong. The words echoed again, but this time, they didn't pierce me. They fueled me. When the moment came, I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound cut through the laughter, and all eyes turned to me. My daughter froze, her smile stiffening. Mom, what are you doing? She asked, her voice edged with irritation. I placed the folder on the table, sliding the papers out with deliberate care. The room fell silent, curiosity rippling through the air. Do you know what these are? I asked quietly, my gaze fixed on her. She frowned, her arrogance faltering for the first time. What is this? I unfolded the pages, the crisp sound echoing like thunder in the stillness. These, I said, my voice steady, are the papers that prove everything you thought you knew about me is wrong. She reached for them, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to mask it. She skimmed the words, her face draining of color. Her lips parted, but no words came. Around us, whispers began, family, friends, people she had tried to impress now leaning in, curious, confused. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to humiliate her with the same cruelty she had shown me. The papers did the speaking for me. They told the truth of what I owned, what I had built, what I had quietly secured while she dismissed me. Her hands shook as she dropped the documents back on the table. This isn't possible, she whispered, her voice breaking. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the calm certainty of a woman who had finally reclaimed her voice. You told me I was too poor to belong. But now you see, I belonged long before you decided I didn't. And nothing you say can erase that. The silence in the room was suffocating, her shame thick in the air. She couldn't laugh this away. She couldn't belittle me now. The truth was undeniable, and for the first time, it wasn't me who felt small. It was her. The silence that followed was suffocating. It wasn't the comfortable silence of family dinners, nor the polite silence of strangers waiting for someone to speak. It was the kind of silence that crushes, that makes every breath louder, every heartbeat heavier. The papers lay on the table like a weapon that had already struck its blow. And my daughter sat frozen, her face pale, her lips parted. In disbelief, her eyes darted wildly, scanning the room as though searching for escape. The very people she had sought to impress, the friends, the in-laws, the ones whose approval she thought mattered more than mine, were now whispering, their faces shifting with shock, with curiosity, with judgment. She had built her image on a foundation of pride, and in one instant, it crumbled. Mom. I didn't, she began, her voice trembling, weak, unrecognizable, but I raised my hand, stopping her. Don't, I said softly, but my voice carried through the room. Don't make excuses now. Her eyes filled with tears, glistening under the harsh lights above. I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking, I was a joke. I cut her off. My tone was calm, but it held a sharp edge. Do you call it a joke when you strip your own mother of dignity in front of strangers? When you take the years of sacrifice and reduce them to a punchline? Her tears spilled, streaking down her face, smudging the carefully painted makeup she wore to maintain her image. She looked so small in that moment, not because she lacked money, but because she lacked truth. Around us, the murmurs grew louder. Her friends exchanged glances, some lowering their eyes, ashamed to have laughed with her before, others whispering words I didn't care to catch. The power she had wielded over the room was gone. And I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't shouted. All I had done was place the truth on the table, plain and undeniable. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. Mom, please, please, forgive me. I was wrong. I didn't see. I leaned closer, my eyes locked on hers. You didn't want to see. That is the truth. You chose blindness, because it was easier than gratitude. You chose pride, because it was easier than humility. And you chose shame, because you thought I would always stay silent. Her sobs broke then, quiet at first, then louder, her shoulders shaking. No one moved to comfort her. No one spoke to save her. For the first time, she was left to face the weight of her own words. I gathered the papers calmly, sliding them back into the folder, tucking them under my arm. The sound of the folder closing echoed like a door slamming shut, not on my life, but on the version of me she thought she could erase. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. Every eye followed me as I walked toward the door. And as I passed, I felt it, the shift. The same people who had once looked at me with pity or dismissal now watched me with respect. Not because of wealth, but because of truth. Because I had shown that strength isn't always loud, but it is always real. When I reached the door, I paused. I turned back to her one last time. She sat there, broken, her tears staining the very image she had tried so hard to polish. You said I was too poor to belong, I said quietly. But the truth is, I belonged before you were even born. And no amount of money, no amount of pride, will ever erase that. And with that, I left. The night air hit me as I stepped outside, cool and cleansing, like a balm on wounds that had festered for too long. My steps were steady, strong. For years, I had walked with my head bowed, shrinking myself to fit her world. But tonight, I walked taller. The sky stretched wide above me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. When I returned home, I placed the folder on the table, the same table where I had once cried in silence, where I had once doubted my worth. But now, the silence was different. It wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. I brewed a cup of tea and sat in the dim light, listening to the quiet hum of the night. And as the steam rose, I let myself breathe deeply, filling my lungs with something new, dignity reclaimed. I thought of her words again, the ones that had shattered me, too poor to belong. And then I thought of the look on her face tonight, when the truth crashed down on her like a wave she couldn't escape. That was not revenge, it was revelation. Do you know what it feels like to finally realize you are enough? To finally understand that your worth was never tied to the approval of others? That's what settled in me that night. And to anyone listening now, maybe you've been told you don't belong. Maybe someone has measured your worth by what you lack instead of what you've endured. Let my story be a reminder, you are not defined by their blindness. You are not defined by their pride, you are enough. You always were. And if my voice reached you tonight, if my story whispered something you needed to hear, then stay with me. Subscribe, share, because our voices, her voices, are the kind that deserve to be heard. And never forget, sometimes the greatest revenge isn't shouting, isn't fighting, isn't even winning. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply standing tall, refusing to be erased, and showing the world the truth they can no longer ignore.